Here we go then. Hi everyone. Welcome to my session today. First, thanks very much for joining us on this Saturday, and thanks for your patience throughout the day. Indeed, really appreciated your time and contribution. Okay, a little bit about myself before I kick it off. My name is Onur Okutucu. I live in London, and I'm running my own business here in London, and I'm basically a DevOps consultant, and doing a lot of automation as part of my work. And apart from that one, I'm also a Microsoft MVP for PowerShell since 2009 and still counting proudly. Yes, I've been trying to contribute to the technical communities as much as I can over the past 15 years. So I love that, really. So yeah, but I'd like to thank everybody, who has made a tremendous effort to make this wonderful series of events happen. So that's why it's just one of the biggest events around the world, right? It's just great to be a part of it once again. Thanks. Let's get started then. All right. First, let's have a look at our agenda today. And the first, I'm going to be talking about the new features of Azure Firewall that have arrived in recently. I know this is not, I mean, well, the reason that I put it in there is that I thought that'd be useful to cover the recent updates and the changes that came to the Azure Firewall. Well, despite today, we're going to focus on the Azure Firewall Manager instead of Azure Firewall for the rest of the presentation, but still wanted to give you a quick update of what's been changed so far, right? I don't see any harm in brushing up on it, to be honest. So I'll also give you a quick demo of what we have so far in terms of recent updates on Azure Firewall. And the next is that we're going to be looking at Azure Firewall Manager, of course, which is a brand new service to manage a lot of cool stuff in there. And once we looked at the Azure Firewall Manager principles and the fundamentals, we're going to be moving on to the architecture types for the next step, right? This is actually, where the things might seem to be a little bit confusing, but I'll try my best to just make it clear, right? Okay, and then the next is going to be the firewall policy versus firewall rules. Yeah, this is also one of the things that I thought I'd mention to show you the differences between the traditional Azure firewall rules and brand new firewall policies, because there are some significant differences between them, but sometimes it's kind of confusing. And then next, I'll have a look at the deployment scenarios and how we're going to deploy the things in Azure Firewall Manager, how to convert existing resources, and how we can make use of existing firewall rules, that side of things. And the last one before the demo will be like policy processing, and because there are different types of rules available on Azure Firewall right now. So on top of that, now we're gonna have some other rule collections that come with like inherited rule collections. So it will be like lots of rules for the firewalls to take care of, or like in a certain order, I would say. So that's where we're gonna discuss all of this today. And the last, but not least, of course, and we'll finally be getting our hands dirty today. And then first, I'll walk you through the resources that we're gonna use along with Azure Firewall Manager, and then I'll show you how to configure policies and how to integrate virtual networks or secure hubs, and like how to manage a hub and spoke model in your environment. And then obviously we're going to have a quick Q&A session before I run away. Right. Okay. This first is Azure Firewall. Yeah. As you may know, this is a kind of standalone security service on Azure that we use in order to control all the network traffic using a set of rules. Of course, there are a bunch of different network or security services available on Azure, but this is kind of specifically Azure Firewall as a service kind of service on Azure. So Firewall, actually, the Azure Firewall has been around for like a couple of years already, and it's kind of service that we use on a virtual network, right? So simply, what we need to do to control the traffic in a virtual network through Firewall is to configure subnets within a virtual network to work with Azure Firewall. Yeah, so that all traffic goes through Firewall, basically. This is a kind of traditional Azure Firewall approach that has been in use for so long. So that's the way it works, actually. So on top of the architecture, recently there have been many cool updates that we've seen so far on Azure Firewall. That's why I just wanted to put it in there. So for example, now we are able to consume multiple public IP addresses, just like up to 100 IPs to be precise. So this is a very useful especially when you need to manage your environment more flexibly. It's like putting a lot of rule collections and they're being served through multiple IPs. Yeah, I mean, I think it will just make life a lot easier. So there are many other cool stuff came in, and for example, availability zones becoming a GA is a cool thing, which now provides us 99.99% availability. As far as I remember, it used to be like 99.95, but yeah, it makes a big difference, trust me. So it's just now, more available, I can say. And of course, a threat intelligence-based filtering is a kind of completely new thing, because when it was first rolled out, I mean, the Azure Firewall, we didn't have that stuff. So it's like a part of Firewall now, which is a big jump, I think. So threat intelligence-based filtering, it can just generate alerts and deny traffic towards malicious IP address and domains. But the actual thing behind the scene is a kind of like a more impressive, I think, because the IP addresses and the domains, the malicious IP addresses and domains are sourced from the Microsoft Threat Intelligence feed. So that's the kind of common service is used by multiple services, including Azure Security Center. So I'm pretty sure that would ring a bell now, because it's or like a huge service that is being shared by many other services. Okay, and the HT Insight is now one of those FQDN tags on Azure Firewall. As you guys may remember, there are some other useful FQDN tags, such as Windows Update, Azure Backup, or app service environments are also available on Firewall. So the HT Insight is the newest element of this tagging thing on Azure Firewall, so which is cool. I mean, the tags are just like a bunch of services on IP addresses that you can use on your Azure Firewall, so you don't have to remember the public IP addresses that may change all the time, right? So so that's a good thing. I'll also just give it a go and just give you a quick demo on that stuff as well. And what else? Yeah, SQL filtering in preview, FQDN filtering in preview. That's a cool thing as well, because I take this as the kind of the first step of providing the ability to support all the ports and protocols on Azure Firewall. Unfortunately, it's not yet in place now, but that'd be great if it could. But thinking that it used to be like HTTP and HTTPS only. This is still something, but now it says that it does support Microsoft SQL protocol along with its port 1433, so which is really awesome. So now we can simply say that you can use the FQD and the filtering for HTTP, HTTPS, and Microsoft SQL Server. And the last one here is the IP groups. I don't know if any of you have used this before, but this is also one of the preview features on Azure. But it's a cool resource on Azure, which we can use to identify a group of IP addresses, as its name implies. It's a kind of simple solution on Azure where you put all your IPs, IP ranges, or CIDR notations in advance, and then you can use them in Azure Firewall rules. So you don't have to just enter your IPs, IP ranges, or CIDR notations one by one for each of your Azure Firewall rules. So this is a kind of predefined set of IP addresses that you can use for all your workloads in terms of firewall rules across your organization. That's a good thing. All right, let me just go to the portal and give you a quick demo around the firewall updates here. First of all, I'm going to show you the multiple public IPs. All right, at the first glance, you can see this is one of the latest developments on Azure Firewall, right? So threat intelligence. So pretty easy to configure. Actually, there are two options. The one is alert only, and the other one is alert and deny, right? This is by default, but you can just change it anytime you want. Click on the public IP configuration. You can see there are two IP addresses, public IP addresses here. So when I click on add a public IP configuration, just give it a name. You can see there is no public IP address available here. So because I have to create a public IP address in advance, I have to create it first, and then we just consume that public IP address out of this, and then we can consume this feature here. As I said, it's 100 public IP address supported here now. I think it's enough, right? I mean, it's kind of sufficient for now. Okay. There is one important thing to understand here is that the public IP address that you create in advance must be, I would say, a standard public IP address because there are simply two types of public IP address that you can create. One is basic and the other one is standard. If you want to use this functionality, you have to make sure that your public IP address that you want to create is standard public IP address. Otherwise, it won't just show up here, so that you won't be able to pick that up from the box and use it. All right, and let me just go back to IP groups. Okay. Right. When I click on the rules, they're pretty much the same, but actually the things that I need to show you is just here, right? When I click on a new collection where I create new rules on Azure Firewall, there is a new thing here as part of the source type. But it used to be the IP address only, but now, excuse me. Now it just shows the IP group as well. So when I click on it, apologies. Now I can just pick that up from here. I can select IP groups here. So you want to just check what it looks like, and then let me just go here, IP groups. Yes, this is IP group that I created. Actually, this is pretty simple service. There is only one setting here that you need to fill up before you use this along with Azure Firewall. This is the place that you add where you add the IP addresses and IP ranges or subnets. As you can see, the CIDR is supported here, and subnet or range or individual IP addresses are all supported here. So you don't have to. You can just simply put your IP address here, and then instead of those individual IP addresses, you can simply just use the IP group here, so that this one simply represents all those IP blocks and IP addresses in the background. This is a good thing. All right, and this one was the second thing that I wanted to show you today. And then FQDN tags are also here, right? When you click on the FQDN fully qualified domain name tags are listed here. Besides all these things here, HT Insight is the latest one that has been added here, right? So you don't need to worry about the HT Insight IP addresses or management IP addresses that Azure uses in the background for infrastructure management purposes. All those IP addresses are represented by this FQDN tag. So simply once you just click on it, you don't really worry about HT Insight related things to be included or excluded on Azure Firewall. All right, and what else? And the Microsoft SQL set. Yes, here actually there is a kind of information here as well. This protocol and port section used to support HTTP and HTTPS, but now it supports it's Microsoft SQL with 1433 port as well, which is a good thing. That's why I just I wanted to just take it as a positive development, because someday I hope that we're going to be able to use all the other ports and protocols. But this is something. All right, and yes, these are the 4 things that I wanted to show you as part of the Azure Firewall. And all right, let me just go back to Azure Firewall Manager now. Then this is our main objective today. So Azure Firewall, Azure Firewall Manager is a kind of service that allows us to orchestrate the things around security policies and Azure Firewall instances, virtual WANs, which is an important thing that I'd like to discuss today, and what else? Routing management, and even the virtual networks and connections, right? So you don't really need to worry about taking care of all these individual tasks anymore. The Azure Firewall Manager can be used for all these tasks and management steps. So because there are kind of a number of options to deploy and manage your security architecture, and Azure Firewall is one of them. Azure Firewall Manager here is a really kind of flexible service that gives you a lot of options to deploy your security infrastructure, because there are many different ways to do exactly the same here in Azure Firewall Manager in terms of assigning the policies and creating new policies, converting virtual networks, or creating a new virtual network hub from scratch, etc. So we're gonna be just looking at all these options and which one can be used for what kind of infrastructure.
Oh no. We're getting a few questions in the chat, and I just wondered whether you'd like to keep all the questions to the end or whether you'd like to go through some now. It's up to you.
All right. I think, well, how many questions do we have? Sorry, didn't check that.
There's a few different things, like, would you recommend Azure Firewall for only external traffic into an organization network or for all traffic? And there's just a few things that I think maybe some questions we could get answered now before you carry on, but it's completely up to you.
I think I'm happy to answer questions that I've been asked so far.
Okay.
Let me just take the first one. I think this is the first one is from Sandy George. Is that correct?
Yeah, 1604.
Let me check. 1604.
I can go through them for you if you'd like.
Well, sorry about it. I'm just trying to.
That's great.
That's just 4:14 p.m., right? It's just 4:14 p.m. from Sandy George. Is that the first one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. The how does one become a CIDR expert? Well, if you just want to be become familiar with your networking and like calculations of your subnets, actually there are many things to just start with, but first I really recommend you to just start with some like some core network courses where you can just start just learning some subnetting and CIDR infrastructure, so that you can just a lot of math in the background, and then so you can just do some heavy calculations to be able to use. Actually, there are many software out there that you can use to just do that. But if you just want to understand the underlying technology in terms of subnetting, etc., I can recommend some of the tools or services or courses that you can start with. Sure. And would you recommend Azure Firewall to replace an organization traditional firewall? That's a good question. Azure Firewall is really good for multiple layer. Is it really good for as a multi-layer firewall thing? Because some of the firewalls in the market just allows you to just focus on the application layer, and some of them are they just like L2 or L3 level. So in terms of Azure Firewall, it's just like a more of a network plus threat intelligence plus application side of things. It's just like a combination of network, application, and some like a process things. I would say. So that's really up to you. It's just there is no one correct answer to this question, to be honest, because it's just it's up to your down to preferences, and based on your needs and according to your organization's needs, I think. But this is really good for when it comes to just filtering the applications, or web filtering, for example. If you want to just restrict access to some certain websites from your network, for example, that'd be really great to use Azure Firewall. Or if you want to, if you're happy for Azure Firewall to take care of the HTTP or an HTTPS, and now Microsoft SQL as part of its application protocols, I mean, this is really great. This is nice. Just like out of the box, you don't really worry about the infrastructure and maintenance and things on Azure, because all managed by Microsoft, right? So in terms of the firewall as a service, that's a wonderful thing. But if you are really looking for a kind of device where you can just do some other things in terms of collaborations with other technologies, or connecting to other devices, etc., of course, that's a different domain, I would say. The next one is the IP groups are in Azure or on-premise or somewhere else. The IP groups are on Azure now. So yeah, this is a kind of another service now, which is in preview now. So you can simply create IP group, an IP group, and then simply put some blocks of IP addresses or ranges into the IP group, so that you can consume that IP group later when you need to create a rule on Azure. But if you are asking that if you could just use IP group on your on-prem environment, no, because IP groups are kind of different. Another IP group is another service available on Azure, so that you have to use it along with your other services on your Azure Firewall instances. I think there is one more, right? Azure and Microsoft has a reliable or based on experience all with. Yeah, that definitely, you know, suggest a hybrid approach in there. Definitely, yeah. Well, you know, the because of the SLA levels are kind of, you know, each SLA has a kind of different criticality level, and then of course a different pricing you know, structure as well. So if you're happy with the 99.5, for example, you know, it has a certain pricing model. But if you have to just, you know, if you're after like 99 point, you know, 99999, for example, you know, of course it could be kind of a little bit more pricey, but it's just, again, up to your organization's preferences. Okay, I think that's pretty much it in terms of questions, right, so far. So I'm going back to your left.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, and yes, let's just check the preview features of Azure Firewall Manager here. But okay, what does Azure Firewall do? I mean, what does that give us? Actually, it simply manages Azure Firewall instances, right? But apart from the Azure Firewall instances, it also allows us to manage secure hubs or virtual networks by providing a kind of dynamic Azure Firewall policies, because the firewall policies are also a kind of new instruments that we can make use of as part of Azure Firewall rule management. So in another saying, if you want to use Azure Firewall Manager to manage your firewalls, then you can simply create new Azure policies and assign them to your Azure Firewall instances. So it can create a new Azure Firewall instance or assign policies to existing firewalls across your organization. It's up to you again. So with the support of hierarchical policies, we can simply bring in parent policies to enforce other individual policies on the firewalls. So with this, we can set the inheritance on specific firewalls, which I can say allows us to control the policy management even more flexibly, because that way different levels of security measures can be used and managed for different needs at the same time. So we can put all of this into CI/CD processes, for example. That's what we DevSecOps guys love, right? So yeah, the other things, actually one of the most important things out there was the security as a service. So security as a service here refers to trusted security partners. That's a new term that we're gonna be looking at today, which provides additional layer of security. Basically, I'll cover that bit later on. This is an optional thing to add on top of existing structure, I could say. So if you just want to use your Azure Firewall along with your trusted, along with your other third-party providers, yes, you can do. Actually, this also answers one of the questions that I answered today. If you don't really have a one single choice here, you can still continue using your Azure Firewall, but you can also enable some third-party extensions or third-party collaboration options along with Azure Firewall, so you can just use them side by side. That's just even in Azure Firewall, it is supported. You don't have to just get them connected by just putting some third-party extensions or connectors, etc. So it's just supported out of the box on Azure Firewall. But as of now, there are only 2 trust partners supported, and I'll show you that bit. But yeah, this clearly shows that it's going to be many more in the near future. All right. Okay. Obviously, the virtual networks and virtual WANs are essential elements here, and I'm glad that Azure Firewall fully supports both. And the last one is the split routing. That's just where we manage routing for or branch to internet or branch to branch on the connections. So what that means is simply we can simply say, okay, I'm gonna bypass firewall for this type of connection and keep the others behind it. So that's that's what it is. We can simply say that. So it's just like a more flexible routing than ever. So that's a cool thing. All right. The reason that I wanted to just put this slide in here is that these are the services that an Azure Firewall Manager uses in the background. Because it sounds like okay, I'm gonna install an Azure Firewall Manager to be able to manage all the services. No, it's not true. Azure Firewall Manager is a kind of management console where you just create your policies or connect to other virtual networks, virtual WANs, and assign your firewall policies to your Azure Firewall instances. So that's why those 4 services are kind of the elements that we're gonna go use with Azure Firewall Manager. So okay, let me just jump into the architecture types here. When it comes to selecting the best architecture based on your needs, we simply have 2 options here, each of which uses a different infrastructure in the background. But at least at this we know that there are 2 options that I have to just select to work with Azure Firewall Manager, because Azure Firewall Manager works with the either solution. One is a kind of like a bit easier to deploy, but it's like a limited feature. But the other one which is Secured Virtual Hub, is a kind of really powerful, fully managed Azure Virtual WAN Hub resource that you can use with Azure Firewall. So the main difference between these 2 is that in Hub Virtual Network, we simply use standard Azure Virtual Networks with Azure Firewall. That's it's crystal clear here, because yes, their Hub Virtual Networks are simply virtual networks, right? But in this scenario, it is you who manages the virtual networks. I mean, in Azure Firewall Manager, you just create your policy, and when it comes to assigning that policy to your one of your Azure Firewall instances, for example, you have to just pick your virtual networks and then take care of the the peerings, etc. And then, okay, wait a minute. Well, why would I have to manage virtual networks? Yeah, that's a valid question here. But there are many hubs and spokes in your environment, and that'd be complete madness to try to manage all those virtual networks, connections, and of course virtual network peerings here. But if you don't really have to create and manage a number of virtual network peerings here, or you're not using any secured hubs which are provided by virtual WANs, then there is a solution, I think, which is Hub Virtual Network. Because, well, if you're not using any virtual WAN, for example, and if you don't have any spokes to connect to your hub network, you can simply just go with a Hub Virtual Network here. It's a pretty simple and clean method of doing a kind of security policy assignment in Azure Firewall. You can simply do the things through your virtual network, because you only have one virtual network at a time, and you don't really want to create a virtual WAN and create hubs in virtual WAN and connect all those hubs to Azure Firewall Manager. Well, instead, we just want to go with a virtual network hub, which is a kind of standard virtual network with Azure Firewall. I'm going to show you this one. I mean, this sounds a little bit, complicated here, but I'm pretty sure that once we've just seen the options and the scenarios in the portal, yeah, it'll just make a little bit clearer. All right, so in terms of virtual WAN, if you have ever had a look at the virtual WAN service on Azure, it's like a managed hub and spoke model where there are hub gateways and hubs, right? So actually each hub can have multiple connections and networks or spokes. So it's just like a mature version of multiple virtual networks connected to each other in an automated way, I would say, because this is not possible in a standard virtual network, right? Because virtual networks are standalone resources. Of course, you can create peering between two virtual networks, for example. But what if you have, hundreds of different virtual networks, and if you want to, use all those virtual networks along with your Azure Firewall Manager, would be a little bit pain, to be honest. So in such scenarios, I'd recommend a secured virtual hub instead. All right. So firewall policies is the next step that I'd like to highlight here. Firewall policy, it's also one of the new services on Azure that we can use to manage multiple firewall instances from a central point. This is the key point here. I mean, because as you all know that the rules and all the rules, including application security and NAT rules, are kind of attached to Azure Firewall instances. I mean the traditional Azure Firewall instances. But with the use of firewall policy feature, you can simply use this standalone firewall policy object and simply assign this policy to any of your Azure Firewall instance, which is managed by Azure Firewall Manager, of course. So, I mean, it simply consists of network rules, application rules, net rules, and threat intelligence settings. It's basically all you need in terms of rule collections. But again, this is a standalone object that you can, freely and flexibly use and attach to your firewalls. Also, these are global resources. What that means is that they can perfectly work across different regions and subscriptions. You don't really worry about the region or different subscriptions here. So these policies can be used with both hub virtual networks and secure virtual hubs that we just gone through in terms of the architecture types. So policies can be used by both. So there is a, let me check. Yes. Well, actually, one of the questions that I got recently is whether I can migrate existing firewall rules that are running on a, say, standalone Azure firewall. The answer is yes. Yes, sir. You absolutely can do it with either PowerShell or Azure Portal. You can simply migrate all your existing firewall rules from your existing firewalls. And okay, and another question is like how to create an Azure policy then. And well, there are several ways of doing that. So you can either create it from scratch or assign it from existing policies, which is called inheritance again. All right, so I'm gonna be looking at this one here. As you can see, this is a kind of comparison table here so that we could see all the differences at a first glance, right? Yes, a policy has all the rules and the threat intelligence settings, but a standard rule does not have threat intelligence settings, as they are kind of represented separately on Azure Firewall instances, right? And also, policies can be assigned both to secure virtual hubs and virtual networks, but the rules only support virtual networks. And again, firewall policies are kind of separate resources that you can associate with multiple firewalls across your subscriptions, but it's not the same on the other side. Rules are free because as they are part of the traditional firewall instances, but when it comes to policies, there are different pricing models based on how many associations you make in there. And yeah, both support a number of deployment tools and platforms as well. And okay, this is a rule processing logic. And I'm gonna just show you when I start a demo. So I'm gonna skip this one for now, because it's just like when you create a new network rule or application rule, you may want to ask which takes precedence. I mean, which has the higher priority, etc. So I just want to show you when I just did a demo. That would be much easier to understand. And the last thing that I'd like to point out before the last demo today. So, okay, how are we going to deploy hub virtual networks or secured virtual hubs here? Right, it's just, okay, well, hub virtual networks are considerably easier to deploy because Azure Firewall is the only provider that we can use with that, well, for now. And then, so for hub virtual networks, the first thing that we would do is to create a firewall policy first, and then which is going to be done in Azure Firewall Manager as well, and create your virtual network infrastructure. That's the thing that you need to take care of, right? I mean, if you want to have a hub and spoke model with lots of VNet peerings, for example, then you should just do it here, right? Don't forget that all peering operations again need to be done manually because this is all the hub virtual networks can do. So once you're happy with your hub and spoke architecture, and then all you need to do is to associate your firewall policy that you created to your virtual network. You can either create a new firewall as part of the process, or you can simply use an existing firewall and existing virtual network as well. So you have two options again here. So of course, you also need to take care of your user-defined routes for routing traffic to your firewall manually again, right? So, but for the secured virtual hubs, here's the sequence again. As you can see, that this is a fully automated and fully managed service here. So it's all managed by Microsoft in the background. This service is provided by Virtual WAN. That's a kind of really cool service that is fully compatible with Azure Firewall Manager here. So please note that all the peering operations here are also done automatically in the background. So you don't need to worry about manual creations and associations, etc. So this is one of the greatest advantages of using Virtual WAN service on Azure, I think. All right, it's time to do the quick demo for the last thing here. Okay, first, this is the firewall manager. When you just type firewall, there are three things here: firewalls, as traditional firewalls. The second one is firewall manager, and the third one is firewall policies here. So this is the firewall manager. It's pretty clean here, right? I mean, there are 4 sections that represent the whole firewall manager. So the first thing is the firewall policy, right? So in my case, I have 2 firewall policies. Again, these are individual objects, right? So you can simply create a firewall policy here, and then you can, just choose some of the parent policies, if any, and then, or you can just create a rule collections, and just get it ready, and then store here. If you want to assign any of these policies, yes, you can do that. Just click on it, select that stuff. As you can see, associate hubs, remove hub associations, associate VNets, and remove VNet associations. So actually there are 2 things, right? Hubs and virtual networks. Okay, let's go up here to see hub virtual networks first. These are the virtual networks. So the thing is that when you create a new virtual hub here, new hub virtual network, sorry, and then it automatically creates Azure Firewall as well. That's the same for secured virtual hubs as well. That's the greatest point, and I think the biggest advantage of using a firewall manager. So if you have a virtual network and you one single virtual network, and if you want to connect that virtual network as part of the Azure Firewall in Azure Firewall Manager, all you need to do is just click on here and then pick your virtual network, and then you can also create a new virtual network here from scratch. So that's why, for example, this is a test VNet 001, right? I created this one using this wizard here. So when I did that stuff, this virtual network test VNet 001 was created automatically by Firewall Manager. Also, firewalls. Also, this test VNet 001 with this FW prefix was also created by Firewall Manager. So that's the beauty of using Firewall Manager. You don't really worry about creation of virtual networks. You don't really need to worry about creating a firewall instances. All you need to do is just to start this wizard and then just pick your Azure Firewall. You can also use a any Azure Firewall policy as part of the provisioning here, so that you can create virtual networks, create Azure Firewall, assign your policies, and happy days, and you're done with that. That's the same thing here, but the main difference is that this one does not use the virtual networks directly. Yes, they use, but it's not visible to us. Instead of making use of virtual networks as part of this deployment, it uses virtual WANs, which is another solution on Azure, right? So virtual WAN, when you click on it, I have one virtual WAN instance that I had created in advance, so that I have 2 hubs, and then each hub consists of several virtual networks, peerings, express routes, and many other things as well, right? So that's why it's just like a or advanced way of taking care of all kind of hub and spoke model side of things. So that's why Firewall Manager also supports secured virtual hubs as well. So again, one more time, I'd like to highlight that we have 2 options: hub virtual networks with standard virtual networks. That also creates firewall virtual network and policies. And the second option is to go with secured virtual hubs, which uses virtual WANs instead of virtual networks, which also creates firewall and all underlying infrastructure elements in the background automatically. And the last thing that I like to show you here, creating a new policy here again. And okay, let's just say my firm. And okay, rules. I don't want any rule here now. Validation passed, and yeah. Okay. Also, I really want to show you this bit as well. As part of the secured virtual hubs, as you can see there, the second one is a little bit different than the first one, because this has a trusted security partner integration here. So when I click on it and then use the security providers and connections, security providers, you can see there are two things. So that's where we can use Azure Firewall with trusted security, another trusted security partner side by side. So we don't really need to, give up on any of these. So we can simply use those two things together at the same time. But if you want to add, let me remove this, for example. I just add this one. There are only two security partners available now here. The one is iBoss and the other one is Zscaler. Sorry. So as of now, there are two options. But of course, this is where you need to just do the configuration around your trusted security partner settings. But of course, you have to just go to the security partner's website and then do the rest of the configuration out there. That's the only way that you can just initiate your Azure Firewall manager with your trusted partner configurations here. So I think it's pretty much it from myself, and I'm happy to answer your questions, if any.
Thank you, Onur.
Thanks very much.
So let's see. I think we have here one question at 4:51. I don't know if you already answered this one. I don't think so. So sure. What are the challenge limitation with Azure Firewall compared to traditional firewall? So license, cost of ownership, and management, knowledge, access, and control, etc.
All right. Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest limitations in there is kind of ports and protocols supported in applications right now. To be frank, I've been using Azure Firewall for like 2-3 years, and then it used to be like a kind of a bit more of a basic service, but I used to just work with that when I needed to put some application security rules only. I wasn't just able to just get much out of the network rules, to be honest. But now it's a kind of more mature environment, so you can simply use application and network rules side by side. But the biggest limitation is, I think, is the lack of the ports and protocol range, because it only supports HTTP, HTTPS, and Microsoft SQL at the moment as part of application rules. So that'd be really great if they could just add some more ports and protocols. That was a kind of promised thing, but for hopefully we're gonna see that as well. And I think we have one more question there.
Yep.
How does it work with Azure Bastion integrated or beside? That's a good thing. Well, actually, the Bastion service is a kind of also a kind of separate standalone service that you use when you need to connect to your endpoints without having to use their public IP addresses, right? So that's a good thing. But well, the only connection between Bastion and Azure Firewall will be like network address translation thing that you may want to use with, because the DNAT rules are available on Azure Firewall, that you can simply create some rules where you define who can just come from internet with what ports and what protocols, etc., so that you can restrict access to your endpoints. But Bastion actually itself does all the things by itself without having to require any kind of service like Azure Firewall, etc. Because it's all forged. Like if you want to use it for RDP, for example, all the things are taken care of by Azure Bastion itself. But you can still integrate some of the virtual network or subnet level security by putting some network security rules instead of Azure Firewall. So that'd be kind of better approach to make use of some network security groups to restrict access to your private subnets where your virtual machines reside, I can say.
Okay, so I think we have no more questions. Can we just close and wrap up? Lisa, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I think so, if no one has any other questions. Okay, cool.
Yeah, let's go. Lisa, fire away.
Thanks very much for everyone, and have a lovely rest of the weekend.